All right, so let's talk about Billings, Montana. You've probably heard it called the Magic City because of its crazy fast growth and that classic frontier spirit. But behind all that progress, there's a much darker side, filled with stories that just refuse to stay buried. So today, we're going to go looking for the ghosts of this Magic City. I mean, that quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the whole vibe of Billings. You've got this city built on speed and a whole lot of optimism, but at the same time, it's haunted by things that, for whatever reason, just won't move on. And that's the tension we're going to dive into. So, first things first. That whole Magic City nickname, where did that even come from? Well, you have to picture it. It's 1882. The Northern Pacific Railroad is pushing its way west, and Billings just seems to explode out of the empty plains, almost literally overnight. And really, you're looking at two totally different sides of the same coin here. On the one hand, you have this incredible boomtown story. I mean, think about it. Over 2,000 residents and more than 150 businesses popping up in just a few months. It's wild. But all that rapid, rough-and-tumble frontier energy, well, it also created the perfect storm for a paranormal hub, a place just filled with the echoes of its own wild history. Okay, so for the first stop on our little ghost tour, we're going to ease into it. We'll meet some of the city's more well-known and, you could say, friendlier hauntings. We're heading inside these historic, high society buildings where, apparently, some of the original residents just never got the memo to leave. And here we are. This is one of the most famously haunted spots in all of Billings, the Moss Mansion. It was built back in 1903 by a super influential family, and the story goes that this stunning home is just as full of life, or, afterlife, as it was more than 100 years ago. And the thing is, these aren't just some random spooks. Nope. People say it's the family themselves. You've got little Virginia, who tragically died of diphtheria when she was just 6, and people swear they can still hear her laughing and playing. Then there's the patriarch, P.B. Moss, who likes to make his presence known on that grand central staircase. And then there's Melville, his daughter, who actually lived in the house all the way up until 1984. Her spirit is said to be a watchful guardian, keeping an eye on anyone who stays the night. So you might be asking, why this house? What makes it such a paranormal hotspot? Well, get this. It's because it wasn't just a house. It was a home where 6 members of the Moss family actually died, right there, within its walls. When you think about it like that, maybe they just never saw a reason to leave. Okay, let's move on. Our next location is the Alberta Bear Theater. It's this beautiful old Art Deco building where, apparently, the curtain call is optional for at least a couple of its resident ghosts. And the main act here is, well, Alberta Bear herself. She was literally born on the land where the theater now stands, and later in life, she became its biggest benefactor. Staff and guests say she's a really friendly, gentle presence. They'll spot her in costume, just sitting in the seats, enjoying a show long after she passed away. But she's not alone. While Alberta's friendly spirit is watching over the performances, the theater has another entity. A grumpy, unnamed man who goes around slamming doors in the middle of the night. The legend says he might have been a construction worker who died during the build and was just buried right in the foundation. Yikes. All right, let's shift the tone a bit. We're leaving the more benevolent spirits behind because things are about to get a whole lot darker. We're heading to a location that isn't defined by high society parties, but by crime, punishment, and some seriously heavy, lingering energy. So on the surface, you see a beautiful museum, but the Yellowstone Art Museum is hiding a pretty gritty past. See, before it housed all this priceless art, it housed some of the area's most notorious criminals. And let's just say that kind of intense energy has never quite faded away. For 80 years, this building was the county jail. It was even the site of the county's only execution by hanging, way back in 1918. After it was converted into a museum in '64, the spooky stories just kept coming. So much so that in 2013, paranormal investigators finally came in and officially declared it haunted. And the cast of characters here is straight out of a grim Wild West story. There's an ominous entity in the basement that people just call Patrick. There's the whistling ghost of a criminal named William Brooks. They even say a spectral sheriff is still walking his beat. And of course, there's the spirit of John Quayella, the very man who was hanged on the 2nd floor. And the sounds people report here are just deeply unsettling. We're not talking about gentle footsteps. No. We are talking about screams, the unmistakable rattle of chains and shackles.
And maybe the creepiest thing of all, the sound of unseen hands gripping the original cell bars down in the museum's basement.
Okay, we're heading out of the city proper now. Our tour is taking us to the outskirts of Billings, up to these big, windswept bluffs that everyone calls the Rims. Up here, the legends aren't contained by four walls. They're woven into the land itself. And we've arrived at what might be Billings' most famous urban legend, the ghost jogger of Airport Road. The story is simple and so tragic. A guy is just out for a run, a truck has a freak tire blowout, and his life is cut short. Now, they say his spirit is forever running that same lonely stretch of road, appearing in drivers' headlights only to completely vanish into thin air.
But the myths up here go so much deeper than modern legends. The Rims are also home to Sacrifice Cliff. This is a place of profound historical and spiritual significance for the Crow people. It marks the site of a tragic legend of two young warriors whose tribe had been wiped out by smallpox. To join them in the afterlife, they rode a horse together right off the edge of the cliff.
All right, so to wrap up our tour, let's look beyond just ghosts for a second. Because it turns out Billings is kind of a magnet for all sorts of strange phenomena, which really cements its reputation as a hub for the unusual. I mean, just back in 2023, the eyes of the entire world were on the skies above Billings because of what many people thought was a UFO. Now, it turned out to be a Chinese surveillance balloon, but for a little while there, the city was at the absolute center of a very modern, very strange mystery. And you can't talk about weird stuff in this part of the country without asking the big question, what about Bigfoot? Now, to be fair, most of the sightings in Montana happen way over in the western part of the state, in all those dense forests. But the legend still casts a pretty long shadow, even over the Billings area. And the most famous local story is a wild one about the Montana snowman. Back in 1969, a traveling grocer parked his camper just outside the city. He claimed he opened his door and found himself literally face to face with a 7-foot-tall, reddish-brown creature. Can you even imagine? It's a story that has stuck around for decades. Which really brings us to our final question, doesn't it? After touring its haunted mansions, its violent old jail, and its legendary roads, what is it about a place like Billings that makes it such a rich tapestry of these strange stories? Is it something in the land itself? The sheer weight of its dramatic history? Or is it simply the echoes of the people who, for one reason or another, have chosen to never, ever truly leave?